Coming in at number 10 is Hybrid. Hybrid is the fusion of 4 of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes into a single symbiote. Riot, Lasher, Phage, and Agony all melded together and bonded to Scott Washington, a guard at the Vault, the supervillain prison. Allowing them to go free, Scott was fired and went through a pretty rough time, losing the use of both of his legs as well as his brother. 4 symbiotes, after reuniting with Scott, bonded with him, giving him back the ability to walk. The symbiotes, funnily enough, actually try to curb the anger inside Scott, but then again, since his symbiote was originally 4 different entities, Scott has to deal with 4 different voices inside of his head. Kind of a downside in my opinion. Unfortunately, after Scott got his revenge on the X-Easy gang that had crippled him, Eddie Brock, Venom, tracked down and took out Washington in order to eliminate all the evil symbiotes, which he didn't even do because the 4 symbiotes that made up Hybrid survived, were separated, and turned over to the United States government as a special symbiote team. Coming in at number 9 is Scream. Donna Diego was a mentally disturbed woman who eventually became involved with the Life Foundation and later became a host for the last Life Foundation symbiote, the most powerful of Venom's first offspring, Scream. The Scream symbiote had gone off on her own away from the 4 that became Hybrid. Bonding with Donna, they became a villain at first and encountered both Spider-Man and Venom before she struck out, attempting to find a way to peacefully bond with her symbiote, although Donna was led into a trap and defeated by Venom anyways. Her powers are very similar to other Venom symbiotes, except with a few notable exceptions, such as her ability to extend her hair into tendrils. Gotta love that prehensile hair. She was also strong enough to defeat all 4 of her brothers, and Scream also controlled Donna's body after the woman had passed away, which is crazy considering symbiotes are parasites and need to live inside a living host to survive. Later on down the line though, after Andrea Benton, who was the host for the Symbiote Mania, was possessed with a demonic hellmark, she bonded with a Carnage reborn Scream symbiote. After it was defeated, the symbiote's remains were taken and used alongside a sample of the ANTI-VENOM symbiote to create a brand new version known as Silence, getting a new corruptive touch deadly to other symbiotes. Number 8. Sleeper. The Sleeper symbiote was very different in comparison to others birthed of the Venom alien. The youngest son of the Venom, Sleeper was allowed to develop and incubate in a safe environment before attaching himself to a host, which gave it some notable differences and advantages. For starters, Sleeper had an altered appearance and didn't take on some of the characteristics of the Venom symbiote, like the big Spider-Man like white eyes. He also didn't become a killing machine like most other symbiotes. It was mature and cool. Well, maybe a little bit smug. He has increased cognitive functionality, allowing Sleeper to take a much more measured approach to combat rather than just diving in head first like other symbiotes do. Sleeper is actually so intelligent that it lobotomized its host, Telkar, and used him as a puppet in order to avoid being influenced by the Kree warrior. Other than its unique look and intelligence though, Sleeper also developed unique abilities like being able to bend light to camouflage itself and release neurotoxins that can put its enemies to sleep. Pretty neat symbiote if I do say so myself. Number 7. Carnage. Carnage is the first major offspring of Venom, and he is literally insane. Being a red symbiote, Carnage is quite a bit more volatile than others of his already violent race. He is unpredictable and possibly even stronger than Venom in terms of raw power, but he becomes even crazier after bonding with serial killer Cletus Cassidy. As Cletus was already a serial de-lifer before becoming Carnage, the extra aggression caused by the bonding with a symbiote only made him more cruel and more dangerous. Carnage was such a threat to Venom that the Lethal Protector decided to form a truce with his enemy Spider-Man. Carnage was able to create weapons as well as crazier powers like traversing data and phone lines to attack people on the other side. But Cassidy's Carnage is actually pretty weak if you compare him to some of the symbiote's other hosts, like Norman Osborn, who bonded with the symbiote and then used his Goblin Serum to become the utterly terrifying Red Goblin, or when it bonded with a fraction of the power of a symbiote dragon. It even bonds with a great white shark at one point, except other symbiote-controlled marine life completely destroy him after Eddie Brock, King in Black, sentenced Carnage to pass away. And at number 6, it is Toxin. The son of Carnage, Toxin was believed to be the most powerful symbiote ever created, being the 1000th symbiote in the lineage of Venom, with Venom being the 998th and Carnage being the 999th. The raw power of Toxin was so great that he was feared even by the King in Black Krull, creator and leader of the symbiotes. Carnage became aware that he was pregnant with a new symbiote. However, even before the birth, he felt only disgust for his future newborn, for fear that it would become more powerful than him, but also because he was grossed out that, normally being a male, he could even be quote-unquote pregnant with a symbiote in the first place. I don't know, he's kind of weird. He therefore resolved to eliminate his offspring. Luckily for Toxin, Venom, who quickly learned the news, decided to protect the new symbiote and take him under his wing. So, trained by Venom and bonded with a New York City cop named Patrick Mulligan, Toxin's powers remained restrained and focused on doing purely good. His childlike personality prevented him from unleashing his full power, which is great because he has quite the power set. Toxin resists better heat and sound than other symbiotes. He can track anyone and has all the combined strengths of both Venom and Carnage. More recently, Toxin also developed a venomous bite, which is kind of null and void because his bite alone could probably take out anybody. Mulligan was eventually killed and his symbiote forcibly bonded to Eddie Brock before it found a new host named Bren Waters during the King in Black event. Number 5. BEDLAM. Following Dylan Brock's debut as the new Venom on Earth, and Eddie Brock taking on Knull's former role as the symbiote King in Black, Eddie was traveling the galaxy, inhabiting different symbiote bodies when he arrived in the Garden of Time, being transported to the future. While there, he encountered other Kings in Black, with one in particular standing out. BEDLAM, who was unstuck in time, was a giant symbiote powerhouse even compared to other Kings in Black throughout time. BEDLAM is unfathomably strong and possesses some rather useful abilities to boot. Like Eddie himself, BEDLAM is able to possess and control other symbiotes. He can also project his consciousness into the past and future, allowing him to give Brock a real run for his money. He bites off Brock's arm and is seemingly prepared to devour him completely, though he ends up fleeing after being distracted by Finnegan, which is another King in Black. So there's too many of them. Way too many. Number 4. ANTI-VENOM. The ANTI-VENOM symbiote was created when Venom bonded with Eddie Brock after the man was cured of cancer by Mr. Negative. So thanks to Mr. Negative's healing powers, Eddie's antibodies gave birth to a new kind of symbiote when Venom tried to rebond. Inverting the black and white of the original Venom symbiote, ANTI-VENOM is now mainly white instead of black. Nice! Oh, right, and he has different anti-symbiote powers. His touch is basically caustic to symbiotes and can destroy them with long enough exposure. Anti-Venom can cure people affected by things like radioactivity, parasites, diseases, and substances. He still has all the enhancements afforded by a symbiote. To make this symbiote even more impressive, Anti-Venom is resistant to heat and sound, the symbiote's most significant weaknesses. After Flash Thompson, Agent Venom, eventually lost the Venom symbiote, he bonded with an artificial replica of the Anti-Venom symbiote that he continues to use even after his death and recent resurrection. So I thought he was at least worth a mention here as well. And number 3, it's Venom himself. Chronologically in Marvel Comics, other symbiotes had come before, but Venom was the first to appear and the one that set the symbiotic ball rolling. After being rejected by Spider-Man, the alien Venom bonded to Eddie Brock, a disgraced reporter who also hated the Spid. The two became a lethal protector anti-hero. Venom is not the strongest of all symbiotes by any means, but he's certainly one of the most persevering. Venom has been tested against more dangerous symbiotes and always comes up on top because he's willing to sacrifice everything to keep the world a safer place. He's proved he can conquer the urges of his race and become a force for good. Because of his unbreakable spirit, Venom was recently powered up by the God of Light itself, allowing him to defeat Knull once and for all, allowing Eddie Brock to become the new King in Black. As for the symbiote, Venom has recently bonded with Eddie's son, Dylan Brock, and they are both acting as a hero on Earth. Long before that, though, the Venom symbiote had also been taken by the United States government, sedated, and it was bonded to decorated soldier Eugene Flash Thompson. Thompson's training and great guy morals, mixed with the neutered mind of the Venom symbiote, gave him control over the alien suit. So he mixed the symbiote's capabilities with his weaponry to become Agent Venom, which was also technically Venom, so I'm including him here as well, just like up before. Number 2, Grendel. Grendel himself is a symbiote dragon, which is really cool. He was created billions of years ago by the Klyntar or symbiote god Krull, manifesting itself from his own blood. The symbiotic dragon, alongside others like him, rampaged across the cosmos for billions of years with the purpose of attacking and slaying pantheons of gods in Krull's name. It was actually more like Krull was remote controlling the dragons to do his bidding, but hey, you know, tomato tomato. Grendel is considered far more powerful than a standard symbiote and is capable of annihilating godlike beings. Standard symbiote weaknesses to fire and sonic weaponry are not as threatening, and these dragons could actually breathe fire and shoot energy blasts. They are extremely fast, traveling through space at speeds similar to the Silver Surfer, and they're tough as nails. The Grendel could merge with other dragons and symbiotes to create a super large entity, making it even more dangerous. For a time, Carnage was in possession of a fragment of the Grendel symbiote and was able to create his own army, gain the powers of a spirit of vengeance, resurrect Scream and make her part of his army, and was powerful enough to warrant an entire team of A-list Avengers to try and defeat it. Grendel is awesomely terrifying. And coming in at number 1 is All Black. I mentioned Krull when talking about Grendel, but the problem is that Krull himself is the god and creator of symbiotes, but he himself is not a symbiote. But being their father, basically, he deserves mentioning at the very least. But for this point though, how about we talk about the very first symbiote he created? All Black. Initially born as the Necrosword, was the first symbiote ever created from the shadow of the evil deity and softened with the divine power of a slain celestial head. It was basically a sword, created from living darkness, and it gives its wielder an exceeding level of power and capability, enough to be able to slay gods. After removing the All Black away from Krull, the alien Gore is corrupted by both his hatred of gods and the dark symbiote itself, and he continues the butchering of the gods started by Krull. Now, long after Gore's defeat, in the King Thor timeline, King Thor uses it to stop Galactus from consuming the Earth. But then the All Black connects to Galactus, who becomes Galactus the World Butcher. So then when Ego the Living Planet arrives, the All Black goes to Ego and transforms him into the Ego the Necroplanet, who then eats Galactus. Very confusing. But then, the Ego is destroyed by this timeline's Loki, who takes the All Black Necrosword and becomes Loki the All Butcher. This sword needs to just chill out for ever, please. It's too much.
At number 10, we have Thunderbolt Ross. Not usually referenced as a host of a symbiote, General Thaddeus is affected by gamma radiation and transformed into the Red Hulk. He even gets himself a membership to the Avengers, but people often forget that he himself was also overtaken by the Venom symbiote. During a crucial moment while Blackheart is attempting to merge Sin City with his own dimension, Ross is granted both the Spirit of Vengeance and the Venom symbiote. This makes him the only character to ever don the titles of Hulk, Ghost Rider, and Venom all at once. Maybe people forget simply because his other abilities overshadow the moment he spends as Venom, which makes sense. There is a lot going on for this character in that short period, but he's still a legit Venom host no matter which way you slice it. At number 9, we have Dr. Carlin Malice. This host may sometimes be left on the sidelines simply because he was never quite as powerful as Carnage or Venom, or even any of their other offspring for that matter. This character was something of a superhero fanatic who made it his goal to become one himself. He was taken over by the Carnage symbiote, which allowed him to walk again, having previously been paralyzed from the waist down. But something about his story led him to be swept under the rug both by superheroes within his world and readers alike. It's most likely due to the fact that he actually became a human/symbiote hybrid and actually survived the process of being taken over by Carnage, so his powers weren't quite as impactful as time went on. He was also second to the Cletus Cassidy Carnage, which left him with big shoes to fill. And maybe some just argue he never did. At number 8, we have MAVIS TRENT, or Payback. MAVIS TRENT is one of the only case examples where a symbiote bonded with a host and didn't turn them into a supervillain. Payback probably doesn't get spoken about as a symbiote very often, possibly for this exact reason, in that she doesn't resemble the usual telltale signs of a symbiote. She's part of the True Believers team and often appears in a state of bliss, actually having the ability to fly, on top of the usual speed, stamina, and strength increases. There isn't much info about her online, but it can be assumed that perhaps her legacy was hidden by her unusual behavior and power set as a symbiote. She also has powers to harness electricity, which is not a typical power granted by a symbiotic bond. But alas, she is a symbiote through and through. At number 7 is CARLA UNGER. Only turning into Carnage for a short period of time, CARLA UNGER is one of the less discussed symbiote hosts. Working in Morse Laboratories, she was running tests on a Carnage symbiote sample that was donated by Spider-Man to learn more about its origins and nature. And as we already know, symbiotes often respond very actively to hatred or resentment, so when CARLA receives a call from her abusive husband, the tissue sample jumps up and enters her body through her left eye, because she gets all enraged. When she arrives home, she is taken over by Carnage entirely and kills the abusive husband Will. Then this version of Carnage goes off and attacks Morse Labs before abandoning CARLA at a gasoline station outside of the city. And then when Carnage quickly finds another host, it turns right back around and kills CARLA. Perhaps this is one of the lesser known hosts because she is killed pretty quickly after being introduced, but she was cool enough while she lasted. At number 6 we have Groot. As much as people may know this happened, nobody really considers Groot as part of the list of symbiote hosts. Maybe it's because he was turned at the same time as the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Or Rocket Raccoon and Drax at least. The way that this happens, for those of you who don't know, is that Agent Venom had been traveling through space with the Guardians when the symbiote started to communicate with the hive mind once again. And although the symbiote seems to have been tamed at this point, it begins to respond to its instinctual nature and detaches from Agent Venom, taking over a number of heroes, including Groot. Groot Venom then wreaks havoc on the ship, breaking everything in its path, yelling out, "I am Venom," which is a fun little touch. At number 5 we have TARNA'S symbiote. In her normal form, Tarna is a Skrull who used a symbiote to protect the cosmos as an agent of the cosmos. She makes it her duty to follow Flash Thompson's Venom around to gauge if he would have what it takes to be an agent of the cosmos as well. But something goes wrong during a confrontation with Flash and Tarna is seemingly killed. Quite easily too. She eventually returns and is then taken over by one of Null's symbiotes. So if we're gonna count this second instance as her most notable time bonded with a symbiote, it is a pretty minor event, much like the encounter with Flash Thompson. Nothing against the character, Tarna is great, but her time as a symbiote might be left out of some conversations because her usual symbiotic form was with one of her own unnamed symbiotes. And then further because her time with one of Null's symbiotes was so brief. But there's no doubt that she's considered a symbiote host regardless. At number 4 is Dr. Octopus. During the events of Superior Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus becomes infected by Venom after a confrontation with Flash Thompson. This iteration of Venom is so cool and actually quite powerful, having contended and arguably beaten Superior Spider-Man in their most notable encounter of the storyline. He also faces off against and actually contends with the Avengers, although they luckily are able to subdue him and take him into custody after the fight. I'm not going to say that Doc Ock is forgotten as one of the Venom hosts, but he definitely isn't referenced enough considering his pretty impressive run with the symbiote, and the naturally cool look of the creature, not to mention. At number 3 is ANGELO Fortunato. This symbiote host is often forgotten because of his short and rather insignificant run with the Venom symbiote. After Eddie Brock sells off Venom at an auction, which I think is just an insane thing to do, but I digress, and basically Angelo's father buys it, his goal is to make something of his son, who had always been ridiculed by his peers. When Angelo pairs with Venom, he immediately loses control and attacks the school where Peter Parker works as a teacher, and he even kills a former classmate of Peter Parker in the process. But Spider-Man fights back and beats him pretty badly, leaving Venom to retreat. But as they're leaping off the side of the building, Venom actually abandons Angelo right there and then, deeming him too cowardly to be able to take on the Venom symbiote. This actually causes a lot of guilt for Eddie Brock, understandably. Despite this story being pretty action-packed, it's also short-lived and Angelo is often forgotten as a result. It could also be due to the fact that he was a bit overshadowed by Eddie and ultimately Venom's next host after him. At number 2 is Wolverine. Wolverine is often forgotten as a host of Venom because the symbiote doesn't stay with him for long, quickly switching over to Patricia Robertson immediately after. But Wolverine's quick stint with Venom in Canada was actually the second time he'd been bonded with a symbiote. The other time was during the Vietnam War when Wolverine was working alongside Nick Fury to track down a group of infected soldiers. These two instances are small footnotes in the grand storyline of the Venom symbiote, but they are legitimate nonetheless. Wolverine has just been around for so long that maybe we're all just used to him having epic run-ins like these at this point. But for a time, there's a wild combo here that gives us a pretty powerful version of Venom with adamantium claws and possibly some augmented healing powers to boot. And at number 1 is PAVITR PRABHAKAR. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. Living on Earth 50-101, this version of Peter Parker is established in India and has a whole storyline similar to Earth 616. But in the case of PAVITR, Venom comes to him as a result of a curse from an ancient amulet that attempts to take him over in the same way that Venom might. He's partly consumed by an ancient guardian that changes him into what looks like a Venom with big tusk-like fangs. But soon after, he's able to shatter the amulet and banish this Venom-like monster for good. This character is barely ever acknowledged when listing symbiote hosts, and it may just be due to his storyline not being so popular, at least with Western audiences. Although if you love this storyline, I'm sorry, I know there are also fans out there. But it just seems that this host doesn't get much recognition very often. Maybe it's because the symbiote is never referenced as an actual symbiote in the story, it's only referred to as an ancient being. So maybe people just don't consider it to count as a version of Venom? I think it counts though. I think it's just Venom. They're just in a different storyline. Let me know what you think.
Number 10. May Parker, Earth 9997. Unlike the symbiotes of Earth 616, our main continuity Earth, the symbiotes on Earth 9997 were created by the Celestials as antibodies to guard the embryos that they planted into planets. The Venom symbiote was given its form by Spider-Man originally, and then later on to Eddie Brock, and then finally bonded back to the Parker family, but this time to Peter's daughter, May Parker. In Jim Krueger's Earth X run from 1999, instead of keeping spider powers a secret like other powerful Parkers in the family, she actually embraced it. Matt Murdock even helped her figure out her spidey senses. How great is that? We have some help as well. Perfect. But that same symbiote that had been used by her father years earlier ended up finding her again, only the difference now was she was able to control the symbiote. All that training must have paid off. Thank you so much, Uncle Matt Murdock. Number 9. Dylan Brock, Earth 1051. Dylan Brock first appeared in Venom Volume 4 in issue 25. Here, Dylan is conceived by She-Venom, and Dylan was born as a human symbiote hybrid. Now, he was once a kind, charming kid, but when the dark god Null started to get in his head, that side disappeared. He took part of his mother's symbiote and used his own powers to transform it into his own symbiote that he called Codex. He used Our Lady of Saints Church as his ground base for operations, where Codex would force the symbiote to spawn a horde of offspring, just so Dylan could eventually control them all in the future, similar to how Null is running the show. So Codex was responsible for taking the lives of President Thompson, the Tinkerer, and the Green Goblin, and he even turned members of the X-Men and the Avengers into his own symbiote squad. Not bad, Dylan. Not bad at all. For a kid, I mean, you're kinda killing it. Number 8. BIZARNAGE, Earth 9602. When DC and Marvel join forces, the odd time that they do, usually it's pretty wild. So for this list, we figured we'd bring up the amalgamation of Bizarro and Marvel's Carnage. First appearing in Spider-Boy issue 1, BIZARNAGE was the result of Project Cadmus's attempt to replace alien DNA. So this beast ended up coming to life instead now. It broke free from its test tube and then just destroyed everybody and everything in its way. So when Spider-Boy finally did arrive to the scene, being a combo of Superboy and Spider-Man, he was almost taken out by BIZARNAGE. That's how strong he is. But thankfully Spider-Boy was a little bit stronger and he was able to trick it into getting sucked into an energy containment unit. Most amalgamations are fun, but all of them, no matter what, are terrifying. And before we continue on with this list of alternate symbiotes, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. You know those clicks help us, so in turn we can get more content to you, into your eyes and soul. So thank you so much for helping us out. Let's get back to this list. Number 7. Groot. Earth 101. I am Groot. No, how about I am terrifying? That seems more fitting this time around. Yeah, Groot. After he was banished from Planet X for being too kind, too nice, a gentle soul, he then traveled the cosmos looking for a new home, and eventually he found a friend, Rocket Raccoon. Rocket hired nice guy Groot to be his personal bodyguard, which is, I mean, for one, a great call. If I was choosing teams for dodgeball, I'd for sure pick the sentient tree. They got a mean swing. So they got close, and eventually they met the rest of the Guardians as well, Drax and Star-Lord. Now they took on a job to apprehend Gamora, daughter of Thanos, but nice guy Groot convinced them to welcome her aboard as a friend and guardian instead. And that's what they did, thankfully. Now on Earth, Cole Obsidian of the Black Order was being held in Wakanda, and a prophecy tipped off the Guardians that this would happen. So basically, Obsidian is gonna bond with the Venom symbiote and then become literally unstoppable. What a prophecy. Nice, love those. Fortune cookie's like, oh, really? We can't have that. So now in Wakanda, the team was fighting current host Kraven the Hunter, but after it had left him, it started going for Cole. Prophecy was about to be fulfilled, so good guy Groot jumped right in the way. Groot saved the day with his new powers, but over time he struggled to keep a lock on this dark side. Groot is just too good. He eventually taught the symbiote how to be good as well, and they remained a unit for years. Now when the Guardians teamed up with the Avengers to fight the Black Order, the symbiote returned to its first host, Spider-Man, before saying thank you and goodbye to its friend Groot, of course. A nice symbiote. This is a great point. This is awesome. Number 6 kicks ass. Number 6. Punisher. What If? What If is currently streaming on Disney Plus, and so far I am loving this show as I did the comics. The What If comics are even more insane though, believe it or not. And in volume 2, issue 44, we find the symbiote taking over Frank Castle rather than Eddie Brock. Now, I thought the Punisher was ruthless and terrifying before, but man, the death toll in this issue alone, it stacks up pretty high. I mean, right off the bat, Frank finds Rocky Vance, a guy robbing investors with his inside trading, one of the worst kinds. A guy who was about to take over the electronics industry, and after Venom Frank's judgment, he now doesn't have a head anymore. Great. The suit was giving Frank a new arsenal of symbiote weapons to use, and eventually it tried to take over Frank's body, as it does for most people. But Frank instead vowed to end his own life if that were to happen, so he remains in control. The guy's scared of symbiote, that's all I have to say. Number 5. Anne Wang, Earth 1051. This version of Anne made her first appearance in volume 4 of Venom, issue 27. Her ex-husband, Eddie Brock, ended up taking his own life in this world, which is super tragic, and to make things even lonelier and more cruel, she was the only person to attend his funeral. So she started to hate 3 people at this point. Eddie's father for having forsaken him, Peter Parker of course because he ruined his life and career, and finally she hates herself for not supporting Eddie enough. So she follows Eddie's trail. She goes back to Lady of Saints Church, but her rage attracted a symbiote, that same symbiote. So after those two became one, she was now determined to get revenge. She started calling herself Agent Venom, but eventually she stopped hating Peter. She started going a little bit to the good side. In fact, when Anne got pregnant with Dylan, Peter was the first she confided in. Yeah, she gave birth to that young boy Dylan who I mentioned earlier, so now it's starting to come full circle. Now you're getting it. Number 4. Ben Grimm, Earth 51838. Making his first appearance in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 304, Ben Grimm, aka The Thing, was the head of security at a supervillain prison. I mean, obviously, he's a giant rock man. I would definitely put him on first. He was under the direct orders of one President Osborn, and one day during his quiet shift, he came into close contact with a symbiote and got a little bit of an upgrade himself. He loves this symbiotic dark side. He hasn't seen nearly as much action as he hoped, so this was considered a good day as well. You love to see it. Ben Grimm, really putting the Grimm in his name. I'll head out, thanks. Number 3. Gwenom, Earth 65. Gwendolyn Stacy made her first appearance in Edge of Spider-Verse issue 2 simply as Spider-Woman. But by the time issue 24 came out, Matt Murdock wasn't a helpful ally. In fact, he was a little bit evil at this point. See, he created the Venom symbiote, so when Spider-Gwen came into contact with the symbiote, Gwenom was to be born. Matt Murdock actually ordered Alexei Sitchevich to go after her father. The poor guy was beaten into a coma, so Gwenom embraced the dark side here at this point, which you can't really blame her for. All these like dark sides in comic books, I'm like, yeah, it totally makes sense. They like killed 9 of their family members. It's like, well, yeah. Also, Gwenom's design alone is worth taking a look into, and you can do so yourself starting with Spider-Gwen Volume 2, Issue 25. She's awesome, go check it out. Number 2, Hawkeye, Earth 32323. Beginning with Civil War Volume 2, Issue 2, part of the Old Man Logan storyline, Clint Barton came into contact with it right after the death of Mac Gargan. It's undisclosed what exactly happened and how he got it, but he's got it, so it's trouble. After that, Venom Clint was recruited by Peter Parker in order to infiltrate the Iron. The Iron was Tony's war zone following the superhuman Civil War, and his job was to steal supplies for Beast to finish his weapon for Project Belcurve. Oh, and also he was blind. Great. He agreed, but upon landing, the group was attacked by Stark Sentinels and Elektra lost her life. And that's when Venom Clint took Daredevil's billy club from her body, and he wasn't too happy. He put that billy club right through King Ock's head, violently saving the day, as most of these do. And finally, number 1. Ultimate Venom. Venom of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. We gotta talk about him. He made his first appearance in Ultimate Spider-Man 33. Now the Ultimates are great for the most part. We see major changes to all these heroes that we already love. Thor isn't a god, Gwen becomes Carnage, and Wanda and her brother are kind of in love. It's odd, but it's fun. In this tale, Richard Parker and Eddie Brock Sr. were working together to develop a way to heal humanity. The symbiotic biosuit named Project Venom was the key. This job was adding up to be more than a 2-man project, so they partnered up with Trask asked Industries to help them out. The company eventually realized the potential of the symbiote and figured, you know what, let's just use this as a bioweapon and create super soldiers. What could go wrong? Well, something definitely went wrong. Later on, when Richard and Eddie were on a plane to New York to fight Trask in court, they had secretly created their own version and wanted to pull it out to prove ownership, which, I mean, great idea, but you're talking about an alien beast here. It's gonna get messy. But Eddie pulled the suit out too early while they were still on the plane. Come on, dude. And that's how that plane went down in the Ultimate Universe, which obviously makes sense. And as a student, Eddie Jr. began studying a sample of that Venom project with Dr. Kurt Connors, and Peter took a piece to study himself. Now you're starting to figure out what's gonna happen. After Peter spilled a drop on his hand, he got the black suit makeover, cranking his powers up to 10. He was now untouchable. But when a robber shot another man, this triggered Peter. It literally reminded him of Uncle Ben so much that he went full Venom. He just made a mess. It was not good at all. He lost the symbiote after getting tangled in electric cables, and the only parts left were in his bloodstream, and also the other samples left in the lab, which, yes, Eddie ended up also finding.